Welcome back. Here's part 2 of our in-depth analysis of Wrestle Kingdom 9.
All right, blah, 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 test. Round 2.
Fight!
3, 2, 1, go!
So the next match that we have to deal with is probably one of the highlights of the night.
Was this this was the guy from Winnipeg?
Yep.
Yeah, that
From Manitoba.
That stood out to me right away just because we're Canadian, but this was a really cool match.
Yeah, this was Ryosuke Taguchi, the funky weapon. One of the only guys on the card that had like a name that wasn't just like sorry if that's racist. Versus Kenny Omega. Fuck. Kenny Omega. Oh my god, man. That guy, I could watch him wrestle 100 matches against tiny little children.
You know what he reminds me of? Because Kenny Omega really was like the classic like Canadian deadbeat type of guy, like just kind of like greasy and unpleasant seeming.
Well, it's fun because like I'm sitting here going, Kenny Omega's coming up, and then the guys, watch, he's gonna come out, it's gonna be a sweet entrance, and he comes out and everybody's like, this guy sucks, like look at him, he looks like a douchebag, and I'm like, no, he's a heel, he's a bad guy, he's a bad dude, he's in the Bullet Club, he wants to hurt you, he wants to hurt 12-year-old girls, and that's a match, you can look that up. He has a match with a 12-year-old girl, and it's really funny because there's a 12-year-old girl wrestler, and it's much in the same vein as Ladder, who's a wrestler, and also the blow-up doll.
I remember too with what he made me think of a bit. He must be like an awesome heel in Japan of just that like how do you describe it? Of just like just I don't know, I guess to us, because we're from East Coast Canada, just like all of our uncles or whatever, just like our relatives. But I remember there's this Japanese cartoon called Ping Pong Club that was just about a ping pong club in a school. But one of the recurring jokes is this American guy that is at the school, and he's just this big muscly dude that always has terrible BO. Like that's their like stereotype of a North American. So I feel like that's kind of the same thing.
This pay-per-view really did nothing to deter people from thinking that about Westerners. Yeah. Because white people really just make a bad name for themselves. They're pretty much the bad guy. They are the bad guys. So this was for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship. Ryosuke Taguchi, the funky weapon, was the champion.
Really, he wasn't very funky. He didn't have a ton of personality.
He did one of those hit you in the face with his ass spots. Right. The rear view?
The rear view, sure. Yeah, and then he shook his butt or whatever, and that's literally the funkiest thing he did. Yeah,
he looked like if Jake the Snake and Tajiri had some sort of bastard face offspring. It was weird. But this match had the best spot in wrestling of all time. It's called the chainsaw. So essentially what happens is you have your opponent down on the mat, and then you charge up your arm as though it was a chainsaw, like you rev it up or whatever you call starting a chainsaw. And then he just grinds his arm on your face. It was really the dirtiest spot that I've ever seen from a heel. You would never see anything like that in mainstream WWE style wrestling because Vince McMahon wants to see realism. Damn it.
But I think Matt Stryker, he described too how like Kenny Omega, like 3 days before a match, he shaves his arms, so he has the perfect level of stubble. And it seems kind of ridiculous, but I mean, that shit is extremely irritating. If you like rub your own stubble against yourself, it fucking hurts.
And it was great that was explained to us by somebody, because we would have never known that if we would have watched this without American commentary. That would just be weird.
Yeah.
I would just be like, why is this happening?
I mean, it's still weird, but yeah, that would have been double weird if he's just rubbing his skin against someone's skin.
So, at this point, I recognize that Kenny Omega is actually in the Bullet Club. He's the newest member, I think, because he's an indie darling that just kind of came over to New Japan, joins the Bullet Club. The Young Bucks were actually at ringside. And Kenny Omega, as many people on this card did, they owed him nowhere, and he wins. He wins the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship. And what I thought was great about that is the belts, they actually feel like stepping stones. Where in the WWE, the belts fucking don't even matter because the real champions are the workhorses. Like this is Smarkamania. You know, as a Smark, I know who the real workhorses, the real champions are as far as WWE goes. But in this narrative, you have these belts that actually matter. And Kenny Omega winning, I thought, was great for his career because he's a new up and comer. He didn't have to rely on like being a heel. He was just a natural charismatic heel. And he did suffer from the same thing that most of the Bullet Club did, fucking just hitting your own guys. There's a lot of suicide planches outside of the ring, and the Young Bucks fell down a lot of times in this match.
Although one thing Kenny Omega did, I think he did do the kind of most North American style dastardly thing where he had like a can of like compressed air or something and he sprayed it right in the dude's face and then he sprayed it on himself like it was deodorant and just like, look at me, I'm spraying stuff and the ref can't even see.
And this is about the point that we realized that in that same narrative, Westerners are heels. White dudes, bad guys.
That still is, though. It is nicer to have like at least Jeff Jarrett. You know, if I got to watch Jeff Jarrett, at least he's a bad guy. He's not pretending he's the Lord Savior Jesus of TNA or some bullshit.
He's going to call you slappy nuts. He's going to tell you not to piss him off. He's going to hit you with a guitar, fucking shake, rattle, and roll, and we're done.
It seems like such a good sort of scenario, too, for all the Westerners that work for New Japan or whatever. Is like, yeah, why would they even want to be good guys? Fuck that. Just heal it up.
That's what I'm saying about it, man. I'm a natural heel. Yeah. I mean, you all love me, but there's a reason for that. It's because I'll fuck you. So, not to take away from Kenny Omega's win, which was fucking epic. I thought that it was one of the highlights of the night. I really can watch that guy wrestle because I know that in the WWE, you sort of have comedy wrestlers being like way more created to be comedy wrestlers, but on this card, we saw wrestlers be hilarious. And sometimes intentionally and sometimes not intentionally, but he was intentionally funny. And I guess he was the closest to a comedy gimmick, but he's still a legitimate competitor. Like I see in a couple of years him sort of rising to the top, you know, like he was the cream of the crop on this particular bout. And it was a fun match to watch. We're still early on, you know, I didn't get burnt out on wrestling by this, but I'm especially at this point in the card, I'm not burnt out on wrestling. Like I was so ready for this match.
Yeah, it is kind of a shame there's not an easy way we can just watch a follow-up next month or something and kind of keep tabs on this stuff, right? Like it's a shame that it's kind of just evaporating now.
Yeah, I mean there is a event after this, I think, but I don't think they have a Monday Night Raw the same way that there is a Monday Night Raw.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking too what you're saying about Kenny Omega's gimmick, because it is like it's the comedy element of it is mostly just that it's just kind of turned up to 11 of just this weird deadbeat that probably has no windows in his car or whatever. But that's the thing is all you got to do is just dial that down a little, and then he's a totally like super mean, legit competitor. It's like a nice thing.
I could also buy him as a face.
Right.
I think he would make a great face as well. I think he could easily be like, oh, I didn't want to be with the Bullet Club, and I'm going to do my own thing, and now that I'm the junior heavyweight champion, like... He's basically the United States champion. To equivocate it to something else.
You know, that's one thing I love about wrestling is I kind of love how simple it is in some ways. Like how there's not a lot of deeper motivations, and it's like whatever people are on the surface is how they are. But also, like those turns, like because you always just want every heel to turn face at some point. Like I'm thinking like Seth Rollins. He's been the focal point of every storyline for months.
And I know how it happens. It just goes on so long that he goes to that next level, and it really comes down to like he's going to be wrestling for his like second championship, the one that really means something, the one that he doesn't win with a Money in the Bank.
Right.
And it's going to be a face comes and sees him in the locker room and says, hey man, I really hope that you go out there and give your best. And he's like, yeah, I just plan on going out there and just like doing my best, and I'm going to win the title. I can see him turning face in a heartbeat. He's going to be the least surprise face turn, I think. The same way if John Cena turned heel tomorrow, like everybody's like that would actually break the internet, I think, if John Cena turned heel.
And I just think that's interesting about wrestling fans, that it is usually, it doesn't always work, but usually you can do that. Like, no matter how hated someone is, all they got to do is turn against someone else that's hated, and now they're a good guy. And I like that. I think it's cool.
Yeah, like, we're gonna see the Shield get back together, you know, like, it's not gonna make any sense, but like, somebody's gonna write some fan fiction or some theory that's gonna make it make sense, you know. The writers don't know what they're doing on WWE television sometimes, is what it feels like. They just write and they just create whatever they need to for the next week to make sense. But the long-term goal, I don't think there's a need for a long-term goal in American style wrestling. And I feel like in this sort of this new avenue, there is a reason to keep these feuds going. But I think this was the blow-off of all the feuds that led up to these matches. I think that's what we saw, and I think that's really good for this industry, this wrestling industry. I think it's great that we can be fans right now. I think all the pundits are saying that, like, this is a great time to be a wrestling fan, because not only is New Japan great, not only is Global Force Wrestling trying to do this new thing where they expose more wrestling to the common consumer, but even WWE has NXT, which is fucking leaps and bounds beyond what they could ever fathom what that entity could be. Triple H even said in one of those dumb kayfabe shoot interviews, right. He wants NXT to eventually be the WCW to WWE,
right.
And not in a brand split way, and not in a literally like, oh, we're gonna fall beneath WWE, but we want to actually be a significant force that goes up against our own company every week, which is exactly where the invasion angle failed and where the brand split failed.
Yeah, and it's weird. Like, this does seem like that could happen. I could see that because NXT is cool.
NXT, their competition, they're not competing against NXT because they're a developmental organization. They're competing against this pay-per-view. It's the same way that TLC had to follow Our Generation, NXT Our Generation. Right. It's the same idea. The Monday Night Raw that happened the next night, the writers in the back of their head, they knew, the wrestling fans, or at least they're ingrained in wrestling, they knew that, oh, last night was fucking Wrestle Kingdom 9, which is a fucking phenomenal pay-per-view that should have just been for the Japanese consumer. But guess what happens? Jeff Jericho's in there with Global Force Wrestling, markets it to the entire planet, and here we are fucking smarking out about Japanese wrestlers.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, there's no way that this failed in any way. It didn't necessarily feel like WrestleMania to me. It felt more like WrestleMania than TLC felt like WrestleMania, I guess, but like it didn't this was a win as a wrestling fan for me, watching that pay-per-view. Yeah. That was a win. That I don't have anything bad to say about any of the matches besides the fact that I didn't know the storylines following up to these clearly blow-off matches. But if they narrate it in a way that I know that these are blow-off matches, and the psychology in the matches sort of pertained back to my knowledge of wrestling and how I know that things come up, then I think they did a good job.
Yeah.
If that fucking makes any sense.
No, I think so. I agree. So what was next?
So yeah, moving on. Next, before I was saying the Young Bucks should have won the junior IWGP Tag Team titles. This is the actual IWGP Tag Team Championship match. But the interesting thing here is now we're getting into the deep part of the pay-per-view. Now we're getting into the fucking what matters. And we see two of the top members of Bullet Club defending their IWGP Tag Team titles against Hiroki Goto and Katsuyori Shibata, the challengers. Interesting to note, Doc Gallows and Carl Anderson were the representatives for Bullet Club. Both of these men, of course, Doc Gallows was Festus, and Carl Anderson is a former ROH champion. They actually had, after the Slutty Geisha, who was fucking looking phenomenal, they actually have the first white woman manager. I'm surprised Maria Kanellis did not show up on this card because of how influenced it was by ROH, but it was Amber O'Neil, who I had to look her up because I just saw all these tits and blonde hair, and I'm just like, I gotta figure something out. And I guess the takeaway is that hot managers work, because she had an ass that was banging. And also the Togi Tonga guy, the roid head from the pre-show match, he shows up again.
Was that him? I didn't even realize that was him again.
Yeah, it was. He's a Bullet Club member, which is what I learned through all of this. See, this was an experience where I was actually being taught about wrestling. At any rate, they sort of wrestle it out in the old fashioned way. The Bullet Club have a manager who is a babe. It's literally what I wrote down. But the thing is the challengers did a move that was much like if the GTS was broken up into two people doing the GTS, where one guy threw the other guy and the second guy used his knee in the GTS way. And I love CM Punk, and I'm cool with him ripping off the GTS from Kenta, but this was really innovative. This was innovation in its core. This was this was like the DOA Doomsday device, but a way better move. You know what I mean?
That's something I'm also surprised about with wrestling. Like, obviously, there's a lot of just incestuous stuff or kind of rebranding and repurposing old stuff, but there is still always, every year, there's something new and something you never saw before. And I'm like, man, how do they just keep finding ways to use just human bodies in a ring?
But they don't, because I can guarantee if you have a conversation with a hardcore Japanese wrestling smark,
right.
They're going to be like, this is your equivalent to watching WrestleMania 30.
Right.
WrestleMania 30 was a pretty exceptional card surrounded by pretty garbage fucking cards. Because next up, fucking Extreme Rules, I think, happens after WrestleMania, which was... Like, I'm rolling my eyes right now. You can't see it, but I'm legitimately, like, angry at how much WWE has affected me and how little New Japan I've been watching. But I'll say it again. I think this is the third time I'm saying it. I don't think I could watch a New Japan card without some English narrative. It's paramount.
Yeah.
So just kind of moving on, the next match we come to is AJ Styles versus Tetsuya Naito, which is awesome because AJ attacks right out of the gate. He just goes for it, and the first bit of the match, he's just trying to get the Styles Clash going, and of course, he's recently broken the neck of Yoshitatsu. Because while the Styles Clash is a pretty easy move to sell, some people just don't understand how to tuck the head and they get your neck broken. And while WWE, you'd think, oh, you've broken the 9 different people's necks, you'd think, oh, well, we're going to discontinue this move. No. The narrative pertains to, in ROH especially, and TNA especially, they're going to push that move because it's broken necks. So kayfabe wise, it's a win-win.
It's weird too because I know AJ Styles by name, but I've never seen him wrestle much. So when I heard like, wow, really his move broke someone's neck, I didn't expect what it was. I'm like, this doesn't seem that dangerous. Like, that's weird.
Yeah, but we also saw a completely separate move from all of that, and that was I think Tetsuya Naito does a stunner to the leg, or was that AJ still on his offense? At any rate, we saw a Stone Cold Steve Stunner, which is what everybody calls it, to the leg. The way that he caught him, he just threw it down as a stunner to the leg. The psychology in this match was also great. It's a real back and forth. This is another instance where I got the sense that the kayfabe of it all was not meant to be explained to you by Michael Cole and JBL bickering. It was meant to be told during the match. The story of the match was very prominent, as it was in a lot of the matches. Yeah, so basically AJ wins. He hits a Styles Clash in a situation where Naito is climbing sort of back into the ring, and AJ catches him because he's on the top rope and sort of just pulls him into the ring to the middle rope and does a Styles Clash from the middle rope, which was
Yeah, it's one of those
phenomenal.
things. Like, there's a lot less of that WWE pageantry of like, oh, a finisher, but oh, a second finisher, or even if there was, like, because we didn't recognize all the finishers, whatever. But in that case, like, he just took AJ's finisher off the second rope. He's done.
Yeah, a lot of fucking out of nowhere, and a lot of wrestling tropes pay off when they make sense. And on this card especially, a lot of wrestling tropes were bullied into oblivion, but still made sense. The problem with WWE is, in 1998, it was especially bad, where in 99 and 2000, where it's like, oh, we're going to see both wrestlers do, 10 finishers to each other each, including signatures. Like, you see The Rock set up for the fucking people's elbow about 4 times and then hits the rock bottom 3 times against Austin. That's what you saw then. And even now, it translates now to, John Cena's going to try to hit the attitude adjustment 3 times and then hit it once and then get a kick out. Finishers don't matter the same way. Titles don't matter. It's really in work rate. I think work rate is really what WWE is fundamentally built itself on over the last couple of years. And that's good. That's good for the end user. That's good. That's good. But I want to be surprised. And I'm afraid that if I was to watch all the promotions separately that were involved in this card, maybe I'd be a little bit more disenfranchised, a little bit more jaded. But in this instance, where you get to, it's like a smorgasbord of all these different ideas sort of coming together, you sort of get to experience it as a whole package. And the WWE is really lacking at having a whole package. It feels like disarray right now. It feels like a lot of John Paul Levesque being like, well, I want to do it this way. And Vince being like, well, I want to do it this way. And Stephanie being like, well, I want to do it this way, And Michael Cole is a senior guy there now. So I don't even think Vince is like that much in his ear anymore. And JBL is a senior also, but I feel like he's got a writer in his ear. And Jerry the King Lawler has a writer in his ear, but he can't fucking say the lines. And so the narrative sort of gets skewed and you get, they're focusing on the wrong things. And, maybe we just do a podcast on the things that Jason doesn't like about WWE as a fucking jaded, disenfranchised fan. But we're on Wrestle Kingdom 9.
And that's something I was thinking, because I was telling my friend Brad about the Fight Brand show we went to, and I was just saying, and he's just as like a joke, because I'm like, I'm just adrift in life. I don't know what I'm doing with myself. He's like, man, you should try to become a wrestling promoter. I was like, wouldn't that be crazy? And I was thinking, I wonder if that would work if you had a Toronto wrestling show where it's like, listen, I can't pay you at all, but we'll film it, we'll put it on YouTube, and you can make up your own matches and do whatever the fuck you want. Like, maybe people would be into that.
I would wrestle in those matches.
Yeah, that'd be cool, right? Me and you could wrestle each other every week.
I know how to take a bump well enough.
I thought wouldn't that be a neat thing? Because like that fight brand, and now it's called Super Kicked, but they had pretty good production values and stuff.
Yeah.
So if you could keep up with that and you had your own weekly YouTube show based on Toronto talent, but again, you'd be like, look, I can't give you any money, it's just exposure. Maybe people would be into that. I don't know.
We also may have a resurgence of backyard wrestling if we pull something like that, which I'd be fine with, but the costs legally might not boil down to as good an idea as we're having right now as a couple of stoned individuals.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had plenty of like, oh, I should open my own coffee shop, or I should start a bed and breakfast, or I should become a wrestling promoter. Like, these ideas never pan out, but it's fun to talk about.
Let's see if we can get in on that Super Kicked situation. Just ask somebody if we can become managers.
Right. And take it over from the inside.
Yeah. It's Kevin Nash that shit.
I keep hearing that guy, Ashley Six, that runs it, that, he's like an ROH, ROH is looking at him, or he's a, potential guy. So yeah, maybe he would just leave and then we could take over.
Yeah.
Our dynasty would begin.
I don't think it would be that hard. I think we could we're smart enough dudes, we could take over local wrestling. Yeah. But I digress. I don't think anybody wants to hear about our secret plans to become Jeff Jarrett.
Yeah. Although if we ever do someday, that'll be great for the people to go back and dig that up and be like,
Universal Force Wrestling, brother. You will let me tell you something about Mean Gene. He's a real superstar. Fuck. Anyway, you know what? Let's get right down to brass tacks. And I'm going to start saying that when we get to the main events. Because the brass tacks of New Japan is that I'm trying to see Shinsuke Nakamura who is one of the best standout wrestlers of this day and age. At Wrestle Kingdom 8 was sort of his homecoming, you know, it's sort of his debutante's ball. This year was truly his time to shine. Over the last year, he has won the IWGP Intercontinental title. Now, earlier on the show, I thought that the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title was the Intercontinental title. Stay with me. But it turns out that the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title is actually more akin to the United States title. I guess you can't really call it the Japanese title. For some reason, I think the United States title sounds less racist than the Japanese title. Sorry.
I remember because I had in Vancouver a bunch of Asian friends because everyone's Asian there. And I remember I asked one time this guy, Kazu, I was like, why do we call your country Japan and you call it Nippon? And he's like, I don't know. You tell me. Like, you're the one calling it that. I was like, good point. This was the guy, he was like kind of the one guy I had kind of a heads up on because I couldn't remember his name off the top of my head, but this was the guy on Sam Roberts' podcast. He was like, oh, Wrestle Kingdom, holy shit, like this guy Nakamura is like so cool. And he wasn't wrong. This guy is cool as shit.
Well, basically his gimmick is he's one of the zombies from the Thriller video, but like way more exciting. And I don't know what it is about him because even like his wrestling style, like he's chaos neutral. He's sort of Dean Ambrose. Like I feel like Dean Ambrose might be based off of the Nakamura character, but even Dean Ambrose is his own entity, mostly based off of early Stone Cold and Brian Pillman. Where Nakamura, like his entrance was one of the coolest entrances I've seen. See, last year they had that full-on WrestleMania at Wrestle Kingdom 8. They had that full-on WrestleMania feel where one of the wrestlers that I mentioned earlier had a live band, and Finn Balor, aka Prince Devitt, he had a full WrestleMania entrance. Where this year it was pretty tame. The biggest thing. The difference they did this year was the Titantrons, the big screens. As the night went on, their screens got bigger and bigger. They turned on more TVs, is what it looked like, you know. And when they did the wide pan, you got to see this like light show without. There was no pyrotechnics in the whole show, but the screen, like that was it, because it covered, like you could cover the whole your whole laptop screen or your television screen or your computer screen with the background that they were presenting for these wrestlers. Now Nakamura comes up about halfway in the show. Some wrestlers would come up sort of like Rey Mysterio did from beneath the stage, and he just rises up, and he was the Wrestle King. Right. He had the crown. He had this crazy crown. I'm sure you've seen the pictures. He had a cape, and he had this cool like his old gimmick was a zombie from Thriller, and now he is Michael Jackson. And he has all these weird like hand movements that are like super anime. Like they're super like I would watch an anime about Nakamura if he was like a wrestler but also vigilante.
He was also, like he immediately just had a lot of personality, which was something that seemed to be lacking a lot in a lot of the Japanese wrestlers, where it's like that idea that like if you can amplify your normal personality, that's the best wrestling gimmick. And I wonder, I mean, this is just a huge generalization about Japan, but it does seem like a more subdued culture. Like it sort of seems less accepted to just be a weirdo than it is around here. So maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's that much harder to just let yourself out, and Nakamura he can just exude his weirdness and it works.
As an avid fan of Japanese role-playing games and anime, he didn't stick out like a sore thumb to me because of his charisma or his gimmick. He stuck out to me like a sore thumb because of the fact that surrounded by all these other people that had crazy gimmicks, like think about Kenny Omega, think about the guy with no neck,
right,
who was pretty like lifeless but still had like his own aura. Like think about the auras of all these wrestlers, and they still they put off this emotion. When Nakamura finally came out, the wrestler that I was the most excited to see, he did not disappoint. Like I really felt like he was a man of the people for me. He was really the only tweener. And during this match,
Yeah, because that was a weird thing, right? Because he seemed like he was clearly the heel, or just purely because he was so into himself.
But during this match with Kota Ibushi, about the midway point, I kind of looked at you and I said, "Is this a double turn?" Because Kota Ibushi fucking started just finding his inner heel, and I mean, at the end of the day, look, Nakamura fucking wins. He retains, and this is I'm going to talk about this post amble, but Nakamura retains, but that double turn only happened within that match, because at the end of the day, they still propsed each other at the end of the match.
Right, fist bump.
Even though Ibushi was down. He was down for Nakamura's entire exit of the ring. He exuded so much charisma afterwards that he almost double turned again, because he almost felt like he was being sarcastic about giving props to his opponent. But the other guy in the match, Ibushi, fucking was the perfect fodder.
And this was one of those cases too, like I was saying earlier about how like it's weird sometimes and uncomfortable to watch someone actually get hurt. And that Ibushi dude was kicking Nakamura's head like hard. Like Nakamura was kind of
stomping straight down onto his head, like
like a bunch. And then the ref's like, "Will you quit it?" And he's like, "No, I'm going to do it 8 more times."
Yeah, it's the classic like Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair heel tactic, or CM Punk even. Like, it's the old school brawler tactic that you get fed up with what's happening in this match. I'm not doing well enough, so I'm going to start using heel tactics. And that's what I'm saying. And I looked at you, like I just said a couple minutes ago, I looked at you and said, "Is this a fucking double turn?"
It was funny too, because the ref was so like, "Hey, you got to quit that." And the guy wouldn't. And I think that's an interesting angle of like, really, we're at Wrestle Kingdom 9, you're really going to upset all the fans by calling a DQ, or are you just going to let me keep kicking him in the head? Like, I liked that.
And that's what I love about the fact that there was 4 title defenses, or 4 or 5. It never got to the point that the ref would actually have to consider throwing the match out. And this is the closest we got. But the Intercontinental title is treated as a heavyweight title, right? So heavyweight title matches, even now in WWE, the ref kind of looks the other way on some stuff, but not as much as we thought. That Gap 2000 was ridiculous, but I've been watching the 12 Days of Attitude stuff that they put up on the network, and every day they put up a new episode from about 2 years. It started at the inception of DX, and sort of I'm like halfway there. Like, DX is arguing with each other about the rights to the DX name so they can make maximum money. Meanwhile, Triple H is like, "I'm going on my own solo run." And that narrative, like, was just, we didn't need to even think about any sort of narrative like that in this card. Based on their actions, we saw a month's worth of Raw in one match. And we don't even know what the build up to this match between the two of them was. In fact, in the main event, the champion had clips in his video package for his entrance that had clips of the guy that he was fighting in that match. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much ingrained and also within itself fundamental wrestling kayfabe trope that you don't even have to rely on the commentators. But for me, that little bit of pushing me along, speaking English to me, just speak a little English to me.
Yeah, it really does. It's like, even if we kind of didn't need it that much, and I mean, realistically, we had a bunch of people here and we weren't listening to like every goddamn word these people said, but it is just like that security net. Like, we know we're not going to get too lost. We're going to have some sense of what's going on.
As soon as there's a break in the conversation, I can hear JR again, and that's the most comforting wrestling voice I think there is.
That was nice, man. He was such a good pull to use for this.
But the thing that I witnessed new things watching this pay-per-view, and the newest thing I witnessed was JR being flabbergasted at how good wrestling can be. It's like JR watched WCW, based his entire career around it, went to WWE, based his second part of his entire career around it, Bell's palsied out, finished his career being able to speak concisely, getting ousted because Vince McMahon is a fucking dickhead, and he's found new life. But the irony is, the new life he found makes him It reverts him back to a fucking 14-year-old wrestling fan. Meanwhile, Matt Stryker is just a born commentator. He was a teacher. You know, he was a high school fucking teacher. So he's able to go in there and he's not phased. It's very similar to like entertainment show hosts that have to just interview Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. I guess that's kind of dated now because they don't really act anymore. Well, Brad Pitt does, but having to interview these superstars week in and week out, you just get desensitized. So I understand that about Matt Stryker, but JR, he was me tonight. I've never identified with Jim Ross the way I did tonight. By God, he fell off that cage. He's damn near broken in half. Has nothing on. I have no idea how to call this match right now. Too many things are happening. I'm Jim Ross.
Yeah, it was nice. It was nicely like less faked out and more just some people that know about wrestling watching wrestling and just trying to tell you about it. It was good.
Well, an interesting thing that I noted about this entire card: no blood.
Oh yeah, that's true.
No weapons. No reliance on weapons or blood. Not that the WWE or TNA or anything really relies on blood anymore, but weapons. WWE's trying to bring that hardcore match back. Like, I wouldn't be surprised in 3 years down the line, like, ratings are bad for a couple weeks, so they try to bring back the 24-hour rule on the Intercontinental title or something stupid. Where they bring back the European title and think that's what's going to get Rusev over finally. But it was still fun. But no, but after that, actually, that's the period that I want to put on that. And I wrote a word down that looks like Gropalops, but fun.
And then, yeah, so I guess it's even more of a testament to how cool that second to the last match is I feel like the wind was a little bit out of our sails for the main event. We're like, yeah, this is cool, but it's not, you know.
They blew their load on the entire card.
Right.
Like, it climaxed at Nakamura for me. Because the main event, let's just go to it. Let's wrap this up in a nice clean package. A small package, a schoolboy, if you will. Basically, the final match of Wrestle Kingdom 9 was Okada, the Rainmaker, who is basically the $1 million man. That's sort of his gimmick. He's got a hype man who just throws Okada money everywhere. It's their $1 million yen bills with Okada's face on them. I have one. It's awesome. It's great for Monopoly. Just it's like, you know, I'm going to buy into this corporation with this $1 million Okada bill. That's something I did. Whatever. Doesn't matter. At any rate, he goes up against Tanahashi Hiroshi, who is he's the, like, face. He's the John Cena.
Probably the prettiest pretty boy of the day.
Yeah, my fiance, who was sat in on this entire wrestling pay-per-view, which is something that's never happened. She whether she likes it or not, she's watched a whole New Japan wrestling pay-per-view. She said that he looked like male China. I completely disagree.
Right, yeah.
But she wasn't incorrect when she said that he was a very pretty man.
And it was funny when she's like, you know, look, he's a Japanese China. That's just a good turn of phrase.
Yeah. So basically, at the end of the day, it was the ultimate. It was the $1 million man versus John Cena. Is kind of how I saw it. And what I learned is I think Tanahashi, the champion, is the John Cena of New Japan right now. He's got the look. He's the most wrestler looking besides Tonga, the roid out freak, Royd Magoo. He's the most like face of the company. But here's something that I've been thinking about a lot about New Japan. There's no face of the company when every tier of the card has its own face.
Right. Kenny
Kenny Omega is now the face of the Junior Heavyweight Championship. Nakamura is the face of the Intercontinental title. Kyle O'Reilly and the Fish guy, they're the face of two separate tag titles. The regular tag, the IWGP tag titles. Like, there's a face there too. And they all sort of help each other to create this product. The problem with WWE is none of the belts matter, so when you're the champion, you're not helping anybody else.
I kind of like, too, that even though this final match, we were drifting off a little and, like, it was, post-climax, but it seemed appropriate, too, for a Japanese wrestling pay-per-view that it starts with a lot of crazier stuff and a lot of North Americans and everything, and then it slowly like comes together to a point where, yeah, maybe it does just end with a fairly traditional Japanese wrestling match, but it should. Or like how those last few matches were all Japanese people, and I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Like, you got me in. I'm in now. Now, show me your guys that are yours.
I almost wish that this pay-per-view was literally 5 hours long.
Yeah.
Like, I wish there was more bullshit in the middle. Like, more, I can't believe that I thought that it was going to be agonizing to sit through this when this was easier to watch than the last 4 WWE pay-per-views.
Yeah, or I mean, the worst one easily was that the Revenge or whatever, that 2001 WCW we watched. Like, that's the only time I think so far of
That's
any.
episode 1 of
Yeah.
Smarkamania.
But like, we've watched a fair number of pay-per-views already over here, and there's always something, except for that one. That was the only one. That was the only time I was like, this really sucks. So that says something about us. Like, we have a problem, or we're just kind of into wrestling too much. But even with that, this was pretty good, man. This was cool.
I know, but our original idea to just cover fucking shitty pay-per-views that won't do one of those comedy podcasts, like, I'd rather do everything. I think Smarkamania, the essence of Smarkamania is that I want to talk to the listener about what is interesting. And you know what? Next week, maybe we do CZW, and we're going to pan the fact that there's too much blood and too much gore in every match. And the next week, we fucking watch... I'm really coming to realize that the Attitude Era is as bad as Gap 2000. Like, almost more so, because they're being very intentional on what they're doing.
That's something, too, that I think... I mean, maybe it's like this with any kind of fandom, like people that are really into fly fishing or indie racing or whatever. But it does seem like, to people that aren't into wrestling, it seems so shallow, and there's so little.
I think the word you're looking for is stupid.
Right. But to us, it is like endless. It's like an endless galaxy of different stuff we could watch and weird things we can check out. And it's like, yeah, we'll just go wherever our whims take us and just see what happens.
And that's where that's the whim that we're on tonight. I was like, all this hype about Wrestle Kingdom 9. I'm not going to watch it. We may as well fucking set up an editorial about the problems with WWE, I guess.
Do you think, too, maybe this is part of, like, whatever weirdness is in our brains? But, I mean, it's like this, too, for people that are really into music or comic books or whatever. But, like, even when me and all my friends watched in, like, 2000, it was clearly different, where I would go get all the books, and I would really keep up on it more than them.
I had all the action figures.
Yeah, I think maybe the thing is, for some reason, for people like us, we feel like this is a valuable use of time. Like, we're somehow learning something, but we're only learning about wrestling, which is pointless.
And as somebody that already knows everything about wrestling, to be surprised, January 9th, it's the 9th now,
Right.
was a pretty good day.
Well, that's the thing, too, is I think that there has to be something about wrestling that does transfer over to day-to-day life. Like, you can use wrestling terms so easily in real life. It's kind of like a structure that just sort of makes the world easier to parse and to kind of put in.
Well, if you say you botch something, everybody's going to know what you mean. I think even if the same way that we didn't know what the fuck was going on in this wrestling program a lot of the times, if you say to somebody, I marked out about that, they're going to notice your inflection, and they're going to sort of know what you mean.
I love so much, too, using the term no sell for life, because this is still wrestling related, I guess. But when you said about how after CM Punk's interview on Colt Cabana's podcast, and then Steve Austin was going to interview Vince, and you were like, Vince is just going to no sell that whole interview.
Which he did. He no sold it. The fuck? He was like, whatever. Not only do I not care about CM Punk, but I don't give a fuck about this list of wrestlers, and named them off. Are you going to tell me right now that Cesaro does not connect with the fans? You know why he doesn't connect with the fans? Because he's a fucking great heel. And do you know why he's a great heel? Because because he's a phenomenal wrestler, and his charisma does not fit into the norms. He's a wrestling cis. He's not a binary fucking wrestler. He's the new tweener. And I'm sorry that I ranted like that, but Cesaro is the new tweener. And that is the way wrestling is going. It's the fans are the new Monday Night fucking war. The fans saying what they want on Reddit and it turning into a fucking ridiculous viral campaign. That's the new Monday Night War. So what you have to realize right now is once Global Force Wrestling they get their buys back on this fucking pay-per-view and they realize that they made gangbusters and they also educated a bunch of wrestling smarky fucking dumbasses who hate everything about wrestling, like myself, and they make you realize that, oh, wrestling can get better. It's like the campaign for bullying and homosexuality. It gets better. And I hope to God in 2015 that we realize, brother, that all these people around the world watch Global Force Wrestling, brother, dude Jack. And you know that all these people, they're gonna know that Global Force Wrestling is the #1 force in sports entertainment, brother.
Nice. You know what I was thinking too about this? It's interesting.
Excuse me.
Is that, people always talk about, the Monday Night Wars and what a great time and like, how can that ever be recreated? But realistically, when you look back at what that arms race was about, it wasn't about wrestling. It was about all the ancillary dumb shit. So it's kind of interesting that there might be a similar thing, but actually about wrestling now. Like, what's going to happen? Wrestling might get good.
There's 3 reasons why the Attitude Era was so fucking popular.
Because of the titty.
Jerry Springer, right. South Park, Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah, it's true. It was of the era, absolutely.
And that was the point. That was what Vince McMahon was trying to say with his little preamble on that episode of Raw, where he's like, the common wrestling customer does not want to have their intelligence insulted, so we're going to bring a more adult product to the viewer. Now, I don't like to mess around with the word irony, but the ironic part of everything is Linda McMahon's Senate run, which really created what the WWE is today. Now, I'm not going to discredit Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube for not having a part in the way wrestling has gone, but you sort of have a situation where Vince McMahon tried to create this new battleground for wrestling and then completely forget about it not 20 years later. Like literally 10 years later, he's like, ruthless aggression? That's PG? Oh, we're still PG, but we're gonna be a little reality era? I don't know. Vince McMahon is an old dinosaur who does not know anything about wrestling anymore. He fired JR and Matt Stryker. They put on one of the best commentaries I've ever heard.
Yeah, so I guess that's it, right?
Well, no, because I didn't explain what happened in the final match.
Oh, yeah, okay, let's do that. Let's wrap this up.
And now on to our main event. The Rainmaker, Okada, versus Tanahashi Hiroshi. Basically, this is when I realized that no blood and a slow build to a match, psychology-wise, it wasn't the first time I realized, but it cemented that a world title heavyweight main event should be a 40-minute match that has a preamble of 30 minutes of sort of back and forth. Not in the way that other match was like it took 20 minutes for somebody to break each other's armor, like literally a match that tells a story. So at this point, JR is fucking hammered on wrestling. He is drunk. He's just saying, by God, every 10 seconds. At the end of the day, Tanahashi retains. Okada is a great fucking heel. He's the $1 Million Man. But Tanahashi is literally John Cena. And that's what I inferred from all of this, the whole night. And the difference between this and WWE is some pay-per-views the heels all win, and some pay-per-views the faces all win, and some pay-per-views there's a 60-40. You never really get a 50-50. It's really a 60-40 on the off pay-per-views. But really, when the heels shine, all the kids cry, and I love life. When all the faces shine, all the kids laugh, and I cry. So this was the best of all worlds. Weird that the two main... Oh, fuck. Yeah, I was just reading verbatim what I wrote. It's really weird that the two main events for a WrestleMania-style pay-per-view were retained.
Right.
I think if that happened at WrestleMania, if the Intercontinental title and the World Heavyweight title, like especially in this landscape, if they were back to back and it was both retention, I think that might break the internet almost as hard as John Cena turning heel.
Yeah, that would feel real weird. I didn't think of that, but it's true.
But that's what old school wrestling is like.
Right.
This is very old school wrestling, and basically Tanahashi showed his true colors when he played air guitar.
Yeah, well, that was like, it was the cool and not cool things at the end. Was there was pyro for the first and only time. There was a bunch that went off like, whoa, we won, amazing, the end. But yeah, then he started playing air guitar and pretending he was cool, and it's like, that's not cool. That's the least cool thing in the world. Yeah, he kind of threw his fake guitar. It's like that thing in The Simpsons of like, if you want to see cafeteria workers put on Beatle wigs and play tennis racket guitars, like it's the uncoolest thing you can do.
Yeah, no, I love the fact that he threw his air guitar into the crowd.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
Yeah, no, he could have murdered somebody. But with that, this was our inaugural 2015 episode of the year for Smarkamania. We're sort of going to just kind of cut it right there because what else is there to say that hasn't been said? I really enjoyed this pay-per-view. Out of a possible 17 bowls of soup, I give this a solid 16 and a half bowls of soup. It could have got 17 if CM Punk had been there. I will say that for every card from now on, because if CM Punk suddenly returns to Raw tomorrow, I will never watch any other wrestling program again. And I hope CM Punk hears that as the challenge to you, you dumb piece of trash. I will fight you in the UFC. I can beat you. At any rate, my name is Jason Phillips. You can look me up on @SpiderHero on Twitter if you feel like it. I never post. YouTube.com/SpiderHero is my YouTube page, and you can watch my Jason's Show videos there. So that's my sign off. Keith?
Yeah, and this is...
Say something stupid.
You can get this podcast at keithcourage.com, and if you liked it, you can go listen to the other ones. Even if it's just some weird pay-per-view you never heard of. It's, whatever. Listen to us talk about it. It's cool. I like it.
I like you.
All right. Friendship is magic.
Here's some Japanese wrestling songs for you to listen to.
Very nice. And clear.
Yeah. I smoke so many pot right now.